at the moment on Facebook. We'll give another minute for the attendees to join in, and then we will begin.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we have a good number of attendees with us now, and we are good to begin with. Just to do a check before we begin with our session, is everybody able to hear and see us clearly? Kindly raise your hands. All right, I think we are loud and clear. All right, so very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Gurjeshan Singh, VP Alliances and Client Solutions at Great Place to Study. I'd like to welcome our speaker for the day, Professor Padmanabha Ramanujam, and all the attendees to the Great Place to Study's 14th Knowledge Webinar. We have had a total of 16 webinars scheduled in this month, out of which 13 have already been completed successfully, and the remaining are going to take place over the course of the remaining month till 30th of April on various topics. You can get the details of all other webinars and the speakers who are delivering them at the following link, which I'm just posting in the group chat. Feel free to explore and check the various topics that we are delivering the webinars on and the speakers who are delivering it. At the same link, you can also access the recordings of our previous sessions. I'd like to start by giving you a little background about what Great Place to Study is. So Great Place to Study is an organization that aims to bring positive change in the education industry and offer practical solutions to students and educators through its products. I'd also like to share with you, some information about our newly launched platform, which is called Career Development and Acceleration Platform. It is a student engagement platform that facilitates career discovery and college search. It brings all the content in a world-class cinematic way with verified information on various career fields. It also helps students discover their career on the basis of their inherent strengths and has a large video career library to inspire the students to make the best decision about their career on the basis of the verified information provided in the platform. So I'm sharing the link of our website as well in the group chat. Feel free to explore it at your convenience. Without further ado, I would now like to introduce the profile of our speaker, which is Professor Padmanabha Ramanujam. He was awarded the Distinguished Asia Link Fellowship sponsored by European Union at Hamburg University Institute of Law and Economics, Germany, and the National Law of India University, Bangalore. He holds a Master of Law degree in Intellectual Property Rights from the University of East Anglia. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Padmanabha, UK, with a distinction. At the University of East Anglia, he was awarded the prestigious University of East Anglia International Scholarship, Norwich Law School Scholarship, and was also adjudged the University of East Anglia Best International Applicant Award. He also holds a Master Business Law degree from the National Law School of India, University Bangalore, and Bachelor of Law degree from University Law College, Bangalore University. He has served as an associate professor and vice dean at School of Law, Aura University, Surat, for a period of 2 years. He has also served as the chief mentor and dean at United School of Law and United School of Liberal Arts and Mass Communication, Karnavati University. He started his academic stint as a founding faculty member at OP Jindal Global University, where he served as associate professor and associate dean, director admissions and outreach, and joint registrar institution building at Jindal Global Law School. He specializes in law and economics, intellectual property law, competition law, economic analysis of tort law, and economic analysis of contract law. He was among the scholars invited by the President of India to write a book on governance of higher education institutions during President Pranab Mukherjee's term. The research culminated into a book published by LexisNexis titled as The President of India and the Governance of Higher Education Institutions. In today's session, he's going to talk about the shifting trends in legal education during the COVID-19 and how our country is going to respond, or how are they planning to actually respond in that terms, and how are the institutions taking it up. So Professor Padmanabha, I would request you to kindly take over the webinar from here and enlighten us with the knowledge of yours.
Thank you, Gurjishan. I also wanted to thank Great Places to Study for giving this, extending this opportunity. And I also should put it on record that I'm currently employed with QS IGAUGE as a Chief Knowledge Officer. And today's session is, I wanted to make it very interesting for students, parents, principals, potentially all people who want to understand how legal education is going to change, or is it changing during COVID-19. So let me tell you a story what provoked me to have this title in the first place. I don't know how many of you know that Oxford University is called as the oldest university in the English speaking world. And rightfully so, and Oxford University had a very interesting tradition. Anybody who had gone to Oxford University would understand this, that even till today, if you had to go and write your final exam, you had to wear an attire called sub-fask. Sub-fask is a word which basically means dark brown. So you're supposed to wear a white shirt, a black suit, and a black skirt for girls, and a gown. You practically looking like a Hogwarts student looking in Harry Potter, and you're basically walking into the examination hall, a time-bound exam of 3 hours. You need to sit and take the exam. This has been the traditions for last 900 years. Mind you, in the month of March, when the Oxford University had to administer the exam, the 900 years tradition had to go out, and the entire exam went online. That is exactly what we are talking about. How the legal education trend is changing. You also need to know that law schools have been the most rigid when it comes to using technology or innovating inside the classroom. All these things are changing as we speak. So in the course of my presentation, I would be also highlighting the 6 most important factors which students and parents or any stakeholders should keep in mind while selecting a law school, especially during COVID-19 period. I hope these are only guiding factors, and these factors I have built by studying, understanding how internationally law schools are trying to help students to choose a better law school. So let me start and let me assert my points. So my first slide, I am talking about the factors which generally are the most important factors when we talk about higher education. And rightfully so, these factors are also part of the QS IGAUGE Indian higher education rating system. But let me talk in detail, or let me introduce what factors does students and parents should look at higher education, or especially from a law school perspective, what are the factors that they need to take into consideration while choosing a law school. So I have decided these factors to be primary and secondary criteria. Whether during COVID or pre-COVID or post-COVID or during COVID, these factors don't change. These factors are fundamental to any good institution. One, teaching and learning. It is still important during COVID-19 that students and parents choose institutions which really focus on teaching and learning. What do you understand by teaching and learning? So teaching and learning is a core factor which defines the strength of institution. So how do you understand, how do you measure a good law school is highly focused on teaching and learning? There are some factors which could help you. One, you could check what the faculty student ratio is like in that institution. You could talk to the other students and understand what is the satisfaction when it comes to teaching, what is the satisfaction when it comes to overall satisfaction of the law school. So these are some of the factors which could help. Are there sufficient resources available in the law school? Do they have a good library? Do they have good e-resources? Do they have good interactive platforms? Today, you could even ask teaching and learning a question: do they have a robust, remote online education platform? So when you're looking at this factor, I really recommend that many of you ask this question, because this is key. If there is no teaching, if there is no learning, then there is no imparting of education, and that is very, very important, at least from a law school perspective. It is important generally, but from a law school perspective, it becomes significantly important. The second factor, as I have mentioned in my presentation, is definitely faculty quality. And I know many of you know faculty quality is a factor which could correlate better with teaching and learning. A good faculty always tends to help students in learning outcomes. You ask this question, all of us have gone through school education, all of us have gone through university education, some of you might be prospective students. Even you could ask this question. There are some subjects you like and certain subjects you dislike, and certain times the fact that you like a subject or dislike a subject may not have anything to do with the subject per se. It could also relate to do with the faculty. If you like a faculty, you would love the subject which he's teaching. If you dislike a faculty, you may not like the subject that he's teaching. So faculty quality becomes a key and one of the and also one of the foundations for learning. So the second criteria is definitely faculty quality. The third criteria, which is key, which is important from any institution context, is employability. So employability is a very important factor. Employability does not change pre-COVID or during COVID. So institutions need to teach to make sure that they eventually get the students get employed. So look at what kind of counseling services institutions have. Look at what kind of opportunities these institutions are providing when it comes to legal education. It could be internships, it could be placements. So see what kind of delivery mechanism they have to make students eventually employable. Student diversity is also an important factor. It is important what your peer group is like. Many of the institutions actually struggle. They tend to recruit students from the same community, or from the same I would say from the neighborhood of the institutions where they're actually located. So those institutions may not actually give you this diversity which you might be actually looking for. So students coming from very diversity bring different kinds of experiences. So it is very important that when you are looking at an institution, you look at this as a very important factor. Also, see what kind of students they're recruiting, from which part of India these students are coming from. So this eventually becomes an ultimate factor in selecting an institution. Social responsibility, accreditation, facilities are all secondary factors. But today, I don't want to speak a lot about these secondary factors. So, I would say teaching, learning, faculty quality, employability, faculty diversity, student diversity could become some of the key factors. And these factors don't change or have not changed, whether it is during COVID or pre-COVID. So these factors remain in constant. So most important, point number one, the foundational factors of a good law school have not changed pre-COVID or post-COVID. Now we will go into factors that might be changing or that could be changing and could be a game changer for law schools, and potentially prospective students may want to look at these qualities in an institutional context. So my next slide is what are the important points the current law school applicants need to look at? Prior to COVID-19 situation, students and parents had an opportunity. They could travel to the law schools. They could probably request for auditing a class. They could sit in the class. They could understand how the classroom atmosphere is, and then eventually make a decision. So many of the students today have 3 or 4 admit letters, and then the key to that is how you take a decision was based on n number of factors, and one of the factors was also classroom experience. Now, unfortunately, COVID-19 is throwing a situation to everybody that physical distancing, social distancing, traveling is impossible, potential visit to campuses is going to be impractical. But how are you going to understand what kind of classroom delivery mechanisms does these law schools have? I think this is the time where you need to we need to seek more help from the institutions. I think it would be a good idea, and I strongly recommend that all the students to virtually try to audit or observe classes ask the institutions which you may want to potentially join to open up some of the classes that are actually administered to the current students. So you could probably observe and see what kind of online classroom platforms they have. Do they have a very robust system of teaching? Because mind you, whatever can be taught physically can also be taught virtually. The mode of the technology is the only change. Otherwise, the education or the experience is not changing. So whether there is interaction even on online platforms, whether the experience is the same, mind you, you may have to foresee a situation where one full semester of learning could potentially be happening online, and you may want to therefore understand that if you are investing in an institution, how robust these remote learning options and experiences is going to be, and you will not be able to experience this if you are not able to observe virtual classes. And therefore the key is to ask to wanting to observe these virtual classes. The second point I would really want to emphasize is, many of them are talking about online classes. It is also the responsibility of the law schools and institutions not only to focus on online learning, but to take the entire experience of online. You could run the student societies online, you could run the student events online, you could do online moot court competitions, you could do online debating clubs, you could do every skill imparting which is key for legal education online. And that is going to be a game changer. Law schools which can adapt and implement this at a faster speed will be able to give different kind of an experience, or an experience identical or similar to the one which is happening on F to F model. But unfortunately, if law schools are not able to implement this, those law schools would lose out, because students are not walking into a law school merely for an online education. Mind you, the other activities which are core and connected to legal education needs to also go online. Therefore, it will be very interesting for you to insist in participating or witnessing what kind of virtual student events or extracurricular activities or co-scholastic activities have gone online. This is highly recommended, the first 2 points, because I think this is a key for selecting a good law school, at least during COVID-19. These are the shifting trends that you need to watch, and these shifting trends are key not only for deciding to join a good law school, but the law school which can adapt in times of COVID-19 situation. The third point which I really wanted to emphasize is, many a times what is happening, what I see in many webinars on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. What I see is, you are seeing a lot of people coming and giving webinars, but, I don't see students being involved by any institution in talking to prospective students. I think that is going to be the key. Because when you go on a situation which was pre-COVID, you had an opportunity to walk in the campus and call by a student and ask him what is his experience and understand through him what the institution is like. But today you can't do that. So how do you make the institutions reach that decision? I think you need to work very closely with the admissions office of various institutions that you might have received offer letter. You may want to interact or have an online interaction with the students who are currently affiliated with the school. I think that is a key, and I think this is where institutions also need to learn. Until and unless they don't allow the current batch of students who are already studying at the law school to interact with the prospective students, there is going to be a gap, and that gap is crucial for decision making, at least for the prospective students. So the third point is, see how you can push the admission office in organizing a webinar or a conference with potential students who are currently studying in that particular law school is going to be a game changer. So the other 3 points I would go back, but before that, I thought we could put some interesting questions which are actually making rounds when it comes to understanding law schools, or it could be questions from different stakeholders. The first question was very interesting for me, which is widely discussed in from a US perspective. How do you think law schools on the whole are prepared to make the switch? Do they have the technology in place to make it happen? This question is basically referring to, legal education has been a very rigid form of education. They have not innovated. Technology has actually not, I would say, impacted legal education that much like other disciplines. Recently I am undertaking a study. My organization QS IGAUGE did a survey involving 7,000 students, and we could see that the people from STEM, representing STEM background, tend to adapt and accept online learning to be more rigorous, vis-a-vis students from non-STEM. So there is this hypothesis why students from non-STEM are not able to adapt to something which is highly technology oriented. The question could be twofold. One, the law schools or institutions which are categorized or non-STEM may not be innovating in terms of education or teaching or integrating technology in learning, but vis-a-vis other institutions might be doing it more. So how are the law schools prepared to make the switch? I don't think so. Law schools are prepared, or even the law faculty has been trained to handle when it comes to online education. I'm saying this with a lot of assertiveness. It is because online education, you need to be trained. You need to have certain ideas. How to make it more interactive, how to make the same experience of teaching, which you could make it offline, online. So institutions are struggling there, but it would be a very interesting question for you to ask institutions, how are they trying to make the switch? How do you make online classes interactive? How do you employ the Socratic method? Law school overall practices Socratic method, and in some places case study method. You can actually make the shift. Many institutions in United States have given 2 computers for faculty members. One computer which actually exhibits the face of the students or everybody inside the class, so that the other computer could be used for a presentation. So the faculty could call upon any student, ask any question like he does, in a F2F model. Therefore, it is certain adjustments that you need to make technologically. You may want to invest in infrastructure, but it is still doable. So many institutions are experimenting this and successfully experimenting this. It is only for Indian institutions to study, understand, and probably implement some of these technological integration, which is a key at this time as we are going through COVID-19 situation. So if I'm a student online, this has been a crazy question everywhere. Does the attire, or can you just walk into pajamas? There are fun answers. I would want you to go explore, but please understand, whether the education is happening offline or online, there is a seriousness attached to learning, and that seriousness should not be discounted. And attire question I would leave to students, but please note that if the faculty is taking the teaching seriously, I also want the students to take the teaching seriously. Some of the other questions are with respect to exams, and I think this is a place where we are struggling. But as my story narrated, a 900-year-old custom which was followed in Oxford University, they had to let go because of COVID-19 and shift the entire exams online. Online exams are critical. It's not just online learning, but if you're not going to take the assessment online, at the end of the day, all that you are trying to do is only postpone the learning and the teaching outcomes. Therefore, it is very important for institutions and law schools also to innovate in online exams. Many law schools are doing it by giving research papers, by giving take-home exams, but many law schools are not. So it would be very interesting for you to ask this question: what are the innovations that they are doing when it comes to assessment? You don't want to pay fees, get stuck with online education and not being assessed. So it is very important you ask this question from the potential institutions that you intend to join. Do you think the shift online forced by coronavirus will change the way legal educators view distance education? I think it is already changing the way distance education. Unfortunately, distance education in this country is always used as a prerogative term. It's not welcomed if you are studying distantly. But I think online education is absolutely giving a different meaning to the very idea of distance education, and it is no longer distance education because all attributes of education, if can be completed using online, the platform is changing. You're virtually connected, you're virtually there, you're virtually attending. So these are some of the questions which I saw on the online, which many of them wanted to know, and these are some of the answers that I could reflect at the top of my mind. Now let me go back to the other 3 points which I find as the key or important points for law school applicants. as I told you, faculty quality is the key. So it is very useful, and it will be useful for the students who are particularly prospective students to connect with the faculty either through phone, email, or virtual events and webinars, so that this will give them a window and to understand what the community they will be joining to, what the classes are like, what the quality of faculty is, what the resources are available, what experiences are going to be inside the classroom. These are critical questions for students, and if you and the only way you can get these questions addressed is asking to be connected with the existing faculty virtually. And I think if you're not going to do the 3 points which I mentioned earlier, the fourth point, potentially you're not looking at institutions of excellence. So this is a way during COVID-19 you can look at institutions which will perform well, which will perform on the teaching and learning outcomes, which will demonstrate faculty quality, which will eventually make you employable. The fifth point is see how you can schedule video calls with recent graduates, alumni networks. They tend to understand the institutions better. They would be understanding how this institution has taken care of them in the last 5 years while they were at the university. So that will give you a lot of input on safety and health aspects, which is also a key at this time. The last factor, which I think is most important for the prospective students, is to factor the cost of attendance as a significant point for consideration. It is very important today that you look at institutions, and you look at institutions which are giving you legal education at a price, at a lower price, and another institution could be giving you legal education at a higher price. So merely how low or how high would not determine, but see who is able to give the quality education. If you're getting an institution a lower price with quality education with all these factors, you should go for it. But if you're going to get an institution which is high price with all these factors, but you're not able to see any alternative, you should go for it. But at the end of the day, what I would want you to understand is the affordable institution could potentially be the right choice if it offers quality education. And this will be key, because please understand, your life, what you experienced pre-COVID, is not going to be the same experience what you're going to see after COVID. There will be restrictions for your movement. There will be restrictions inside the classroom. There will be restrictions outside the classroom, because COVID-19 has changed the way we have been living our life. And it is, unless we find a vaccination or a cure, it is going to change the way we tend to interact with people. So keep this in mind. And I think the cost factor or cost of attendance would become an important factor in deciding which institutions you will join. So these are 6 points which I really wanted to give you as a takeaway: how prospective students, how different stakeholders can potentially choose an institution of excellence. Now I will open this forum for Q&A, but I would welcome you to reflect or give me any inputs, and I know I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
All right. So I think that was a very good insight on how we are going to see that the institutions are going to react now that we have been affected with the COVID. So I'd request our attendees, if they have any questions, feel free to kindly post it in the group chat or on the Q&A panel. We'll give them about 2 to 3 minutes to post anything. So actually, I have one question, Professor Padmanabha. By maybe till that time, you can answer that. So since now that we see, as you mentioned, that legal education is quite a rigid format, right? So since now we are struck, and do you think that the institutions in India, are they technologically, or that advanced, or were they already looking at such kind of solution, or probably to take their learning online, that they can make this switch? I think you also covered this in your pointers, but probably if you can make it a little more elaborate, it'll be easier to understand if the students can actually expect this kind of education to be received on an online platform or not in the future.
That's a good question. I was looking at different models. Normally such. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I was mentioning that I was studying different models. Normally, such recommendation or such guidelines comes from regulatory bodies.
Right.
It was very interesting to see American Bar Association in 2019 increasing the number of credits from 10 mandated credits to 20 mandated credits for online courses. I think that was a very interesting move. And this was, mind you, pre-COVID. There was no COVID then.
Right.
The COVID is a January, February, March 2020 phenomenon. So I was studying what made American Bar Association increase the credits. So they wanted US law schools to integrate their current education with technology and see what courses could actually function online. And they are actually, in a way, doing that, prepared law schools to actually function online. And therefore, the switch in US, because the ABA mandated certain courses to be delivered only online, helped faculty to have some kind of experience in delivering or teaching pedagogy. They could easily adapt and switch faster. But when I was seeing institutions like in India, there's no such mandate for law schools to have certain credits of online courses. But very
True.
interestingly, few days before, I saw a BCI guideline coming for and aggressively pushing law schools to go online. And BCI used a very interesting clause. It said in the BCI regulation that students had to have the training of computer, and therefore they said that the students need to use that training on computers to eventually switch to e-learning platform. I might agree, I might disagree whether that is a way forward. But I can see many Indian law schools actually struggling, because there are two kinds of online education that you can actually showcase to students. One is what we call as asynchronous model, where you're trying to integrate sophisticated teaching methodology, which you are doing on F2F model, on online model. This switch cannot happen because you need to prepare your modules, you need to prepare your materials to support it. But what can easily happen is you just switch to live streaming classes where a faculty is sitting in front of the camera and delivering lectures. I think this, whatever the switch is happening in India, is happening only on the latter category, which is the live streaming of classes, not on the former category, which actually has a very strong integration of technology into learning. So eventually, I think during COVID, during the next few months, the law schools need to innovate and bring more technology platforms to eventually move into a more rigorous online teaching than what is actually happening today.
All right. All right. I have a follow-up question, but I think somebody has written something in the group chat. I would take that question before I throw my follow-up question. So Raghu wants to ask, is studying law after completing another different course after 12th standard a good idea?
Uh, yeah, and studying law after doing another different course. So, Raghu, I hope you are meaning that you would want to do another graduation before studying law. I would interpret this question in that way. I think it's a fantastic idea, because I think 3 years of you moving into another discipline will give you a strong, I would say, background check whether you really want to do law, or if you want to do law, which area you would want to go and specialize. Mind you, you need to know that till 1996, we did not have a law school which had actually a 5-year integrated program in India. The only way legal education could have been studied is 3+3 model, which is like the US model. You do an undergraduation and then do a JD. So it is Madhav Menon's contribution to this country, the fact that we have a 5-year DLLD program. And this is just the last 20-25 years experience. But if you want to revisit and go back and explore, yes, you can do it. But one thing you may want to keep in mind, the 5-year model helps you in saving one very valuable year. So the 6-year model, you lose out one valuable year. So you need to know what you're sacrificing and why you're sacrificing that time and what you're going to gain. If you can do this, balancing act, and if you still think that 6-year model is going to be the best model, please go ahead.
All right. Uh, Next question is from Shankar. He asks, do you think there will be a hybrid way of teaching, like utilizing both online and classroom sessions?
Uh, See, it all depends on how the curve on COVID-19 is eventually going to go. If the COVID-19 curve is going to go really straight up, then I don't think so the campuses will open. If the campuses will not open, I don't see how the hybrid models will work, because they need to have access to that infrastructure where they eventually will go and perform that teaching. But having said that, it is not looking that bad a situation also, as we see today. So the institutions might open up, not necessarily for students, maybe for faculty or administrative staff to continue. So in that model, an hybrid model might work. So they might actually stand in the classroom. They might build better studios, better audio video, and a better interactive board. Today, they're not just standing in front of you and talking to you. They don't have a board, or they don't have an interactive panel on which they could engage you. But I think the hybrid model which you are suggesting is basically the model which is called as the asynchronous model, where you are trying to use all kinds of technology and make the classroom more interactive. I think that is the key, and you're absolutely right. If eventually the universities and institutions start opening up, I think this model could, you can see this model aggressively being practiced by many institutions.
All right. There's another question. So this person would like to ask that I would like to know how assessments would be managed by institutions when learning is offered in online mode for subjects like law that demands more interaction.
Yeah, good question. That was one of the challenges also, which I'm trying to do a study. How institutions can move away from this old idea of exam, because see, it's very important. I'll put down the challenges. What are the challenges? You could have two different kinds of online exams. One is what we call as the proctor model, where you are basically sitting in front of the camera. You get a normal exam paper, which you get, but it's virtual exam paper, and you have to sit in front of a camera, and you need to sit and write the exam for 3 hours. You cannot leave the space before the exam gets over, and you have been proctored, you have been monitored by the institution, and there'll be a proctor who will be watching all the students who are sitting in front of the camera, so that cheating does not happen. There's another model, which I really like. This model does not care where you are. This model does not care what resources you use. This model does not care whose help you seek. But at the end of the day, this model is going to be time bound, and it's going to be very challenging. They may ask you to read an 100 pages book and write a review about that book. So this model is going to only do a check on honesty and integrity. It only, what this model is going to check is this your work, or I hope you're not copied from anybody's work. I think this model is going to be more effective. We call this as assessment review software, like plagiarism check softwares, which could be used, and the exam could be an open book exam, 24-hour exam, but the answer sheet will go through a software to check whether it is not plagiarized, and if it is plagiarized, you will be marked 0. If it is not, you will be assessed. I think this is a better model for law schools, because at the end of the day, law schools tend to check on the application of the knowledge, or not on the black letter law, and this model can be easily adopted by the law schools.
All right. I think that was a very interesting question, and the answer itself as well. All right. So the next question comes from Dr. Rashmi. She says this pandemic is sudden, as so is the switching over to learning wholly through technology. Not all places have good connectivity to connect students online, specific to Meerut. I feel students, many of them come from the rural background. How do we solve this problem?
I think this is the biggest challenge for India when it comes to online learning. I have to say, I have to agree with Rashmi, because I just did a study and I published in fact, the QS IGAUGE did a study and published a report called a wake-up call for internet service providers, where we studied how students are, what kind of platforms the students are using, be it mobile hotspots, or be it broadband. There are severe problems when it comes to infrastructure. I think the country as a whole needs to respond. I absolutely agree to Rashmi. If we do not make our infrastructure ready, I think education institutions going to have a hard time during COVID-19, and this is not just going to go away. We're going to see the situation lagging for at least a year till the vaccinations are out. And it is important how we can work and significantly improve the connectivity. And I think since the mobility is also affected, the students can't move from one place to another place where connectivity is to have access to this learning outcome. makes it more difficult. So I absolutely agree with Rashmi. It is a wake-up call for internet service providers. If we have to make our online education valuable, it is very important we have the infrastructure. But at the same time, I don't think so. It is doable. It is just identifying the areas with poor connectivity and making it more accessible. And this is the need of the hour. I think it's going to be a win-win situation for India, because investing in these infrastructure is eventually going to make us more tech savvy, and ultimately winners. And I think this is an investment which the government should has to make. And that is what our report says. And we are also planning to send this report to Ministry of Information and Technology, so that they could see what they can do to help students.
Sure. So our next question is, do you think all the law schools are prepared to have infrastructure to support the need of the hour? Because most of the law schools in India lacks basic infrastructure. That's the first question. The second question is, do you think economic background of the student will create an issue in online learning?
I think let me take the question of law school infrastructure. We have roughly 27 national law schools and roughly more than 1,400 colleges. I am absolutely the student who's asking this question is absolutely right. Law schools have many of the law colleges have to struggle with the infrastructure. Many of the law schools have to struggle with the infrastructure. It is not that every law school is at the same level of imparting education. I think this is why I could also see a trend in my analysis, why STEM could make a normal progression. Because while you're studying STEM, technology labs, access to IT becomes a very important aspect of your learning. But whereas when you go to law school, even though electronic resources are all important in law school, many of them don't even have functioning computers in the law school or in the law colleges perspective. Yes, it is a very important question. I think this is a question which needs to absolutely be given to Bar Council of India, because it's Bar Council of India which has been regulating these law colleges. If they're not able to, if they have been permitting law colleges to continue without this infrastructure, these are the times at which they need to answer hard questions. Because afraid not, the question is very valid. They don't even have basic infrastructure, forget about integrating online. That is why it becomes important for prospective students to ask these questions at the time of joining. What is your teaching platform like? That is why I tell many students, do not take the decision of joining law school and any other I would say degree for that matter, without visiting the university, without understanding the infrastructure, without appreciating the facility. But at the same time, the cost of education at these institutions could be at a premium price. That brings us to the next question. Accessibility to quality institutions. Not everybody can have access, but at the same time, there are good government colleges with good infrastructures also. But what I want to tell you is, I think Geo has brought us to a situation where accessibility will no longer be an issue. Access to internet connection is possible through a mobile phone. And today, I understand, whatever wherever you're coming from, you tend to have a mobile phone. You tend to have a mobile connection with the data card. Given these factors, whether economic accessibility should be a question as far as online learning goes, I think could be challenged. The fact that Geo reduced the data prices and you could actually do online learning, listen to the lectures by paying $230 the whole month, is interesting, and it is accessible. And I think that is one place where we have run one by making the technology accessible. The other places, not all infrastructures are accessible. So these are the things that needs to be balanced. And I think it's a question also for the students, how they need to go, prospective students, how they need to be investing time in selecting institutions.
All right. The next question comes from Chitra. Do you see an increased trend in institutions thinking about online law universities and implementing a full-fledged online university for law?
I just don't see a trend, but I see a market, and I see a business idea. Thank you, Chitra, for asking me that question. Let me tell you, Arizona State University in US, is as we speak, is trying to enter India. It has the biggest and widest online programs possible. They offer more than 3,500 online programs. And there is a foundation called the Siena Foundation, which is actually aligning with Arizona to introduce all these online programs, to Indian students. You would probably get an online degree, full-fledged degree from Arizona State University, United States. I think online degrees were slowly starting. I also saw Oxford, Osgood Hall from Canada offering a LLM through an online platform. The only thing which stopped students from looking at seriously was whether it is rigorous. But those were very myth-based questions. But if the technology, if the robustness of the technology is good, I think the online education can equally be rigorous. That is not a question for students to ask. That is a question for faculty to make sure that he makes that online experience rigorous. And therefore, I think the future prospects of online degrees is going to become much more valuable in Indian context, because not every institution is online ready, not every institution is e-ready, and not all students can actually afford expensive education. So online education is going to become a substitute, if not completely replace FTF model.
All right. Okay, the next question is again from Shankar. So Shankar, thank you for asking this question. Actually, this was also my follow-up question. So he says that a lot of support activities like moot courts will also be conducted virtually, which is critical to law. What is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the activities which are co-scholastic from a law school context basically gets his energy from moot court. Moot court is key to for anybody's presence or study in a law school. So I think moot court is going to go virtually, and it is easy, right? As you create a classroom, you need to create a virtual courtroom where two parties with a third person being a judge can come and adjudicate. Mind you, it is not only happening at the moot court level. Online dispute resolution is becoming a substitute for arbitrations today. People are taking the dispute resolution system to online as we speak. If it can be done in real sense, I think virtually it's going to be very important for any law school, as part of its key, I would say, institutional pedagogy, that if they don't have a virtual moot court, they are going to lose out. Students are not going to be interested in only online teaching platforms. They also want activities like moot court, debate, and other extracurricular activities, which are very important for law school learning, to parallelly happen with the mainstream education. So that's a very good question. I hope I have responded to that question.
All right. So the next question comes from Mudbir. He says that in case a timely vaccine is not introduced and educational institutions remain closed, how do the institutions plan to accommodate students from areas where only 2G availability is there, specifically areas like J&K?
It's a good question. I think if that is the case, the government would operate what is called as sheds of learning. They would probably create the small centers of learning across the state where it could be easily accessible by students. The panchayat of the particular village could also play a role in operating and making groups accessible during their hours of learning. So it is doable. It is not that it is not doable. If we seriously reach a situation where the institutions will be closed, government will be actively seeing how they can put up what I call as the sheds of learning, where a student could walk into that, technologically connect to what is happening inside the class and walk out. So we need to create such stations of learning, which is the key, because we can't create infrastructure, overnight, but we can create this temporary infrastructure which could act as pillars till we find a vaccination.
All right. So coming back to my questions, so I have two questions. One is, do you think, so I'm talking from a larger perspective. So one is that, the administration or the regulatory bodies, they need to, take an action from the viewpoint of, making the institutions equipped with the proper infrastructure or proper technology infrastructure to enable them to, maybe execute an online moot court or online learning at large. But do you think that the faculty that we have in India especially the ones which are teaching in the law universities, are they equipped and are they actually tech savvy to generate such kind of content which can engage the Indian students, or rather the students at large?
See, I don't want to ask this question whether they are tech savvy. I'm sure many of them have studied in the law school. Many of them have used e-resources. Many of them have the experiences of, writing papers and research papers. So I think if they do not have the training, it's a time they better get this training. Because they can't pass the buck to institutions saying that they don't have training. They need to build their capacity, and if they can't, it is a responsibility of the university to quickly organize the FDP virtually and make sure they get a training. And and it is for the faculty to use these FDPs and make sure that they get trained. Because this is not the time for you to say that this is how I can teach. These are my limitations. A faculty cannot say that, and the faculty should not say that. But I see what you are trying to say. I do understand that not many faculty do come forward to get technologically trained. But the need of the hour is it's whether it is pre-COVID, whether it is post-COVID, or whether it is during COVID. It is all about students. It's
Yeah.
So we need to keep their interest alive and make sure that everybody else raises their quality, raises their standard, to make sure that we could give the same value of education online.
Right. And that brings me to my next question, which is also a follow up to the same. So as we spoke about that, we need to keep the students engaged, right? That's the main key point. Now, so I was just talking to one of the faculty a couple of days back. She's a very good friend of mine. She teaches in a law school. Sorry, not in a law school, but she's a teacher. She's a faculty in general, and she was mentioning a very generic issue, which is that in a total class of, let us say, 70 students, when they are hosting the sessions online, there are only 15 or 20 who are making the attendance to that class. How do we kind of what's your comment on the same? How can we resolve this, or probably what is the way to actually have those students maximize the attendance in these kind of online classrooms maybe?
No, my question is will go one step, I would say, back. Ensuring attendance, even in an F2F model, is difficult. Forget about virtual model. When the classes were happening normally, also you would never get full attendance. I always say that attendance, should not be a mandatory thing for students. Because what I feel is, if a faculty is teaching good, you will see the entire class full. And I would say that if the class is not full, I think you need to do some changes in your teaching to make sure that it is full. The responsibility is on the teacher to make sure that the classroom is interesting. Because I never went to a law school in abroad where they used to take the attendance and make sure that I sit in the class. I used to go to the classroom because I thought that if I would miss this lecture, I'm missing something really interesting. So I think unless you don't build that content, every university in India is going to struggle, because most of the classroom experience is very monotonous. It doesn't engage. It doesn't make the classroom experience interactive. You think the way you learn is the way you teach. I think that is wrong. It is not necessarily the way you learn might be the right way to teach. You may want to get experience of teaching. Look at different cultures where how teaching is basically done. So it has nothing to do with the students. It has to do everything with the faculty. So if I in my 12 years of teaching never took a class attendance for students. I thought that if my classroom is class engagement is good, they will come, and I always had more than 80% of the attendance. So I think it's up to the faculty. How do you raise the level of teaching and make sure that you engage the student in such a way that they would die to come and sit in your class, and therefore increase that class attendance. But you cannot force students to attend class. The more you force students to attend class, the less they are going to come and attend the class. So I am to a model where attendance should not be compulsory, while it should be teachers' responsibility to make the classroom interesting.
All right, all right. Thank you so much for answering that. And I think with this question, we move towards the closing of our session for the day.
Thank
So
you.
I request Professor Padmanabha to, if you want to add something, to close your session for the day, kindly please.
I would only urge parents and students that these are difficult times. So these are the times when it is difficult to go forward and make a decision which could be progressive. So look at these some of the points that I have mentioned in the webinars, which could be useful for you to potentially select a law school. But do follow the highly recommended points. I am very sure they will be very useful for selecting a good law school. And I wish all of you very best. And I hope you will have a successful decision to make. And I hope we will all be out of this COVID-19 situation. Stay safe, stay home. Thank you so much, GPS, and thank you so much, Gurjashan, for having me to address the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to host this webinar. And I think a big thanks to you, and also thanks to the audience who have been an amazing audience and have put up such interesting questions. And I just have one thing to say. So if anybody thinks that they have any questions which could come to their mind later, feel free to drop them to me. I can facilitate to get you the responses from Professor Padmanabha. I'm just leaving my email address in the chat box, and feel free to write to me in case you have any questions that pop up to you later. And now I would like to say that if you feel like that we are not covering any of the topics in the webinars that we are delivering this month, so you can also write to me and suggest us the ideas for hosting the webinars on the particular topics as well. And lastly, I would also now leave the social media handles to our page, which is Great Place to Study page. You can go ahead and follow them and stay updated about the information on various careers. And I think that's all for the day. Thank you so much once again, Professor Padmanabha, and thank you, everybody. Well, until tomorrow, thank you so much. Thank you. See you all
Thank you.
again.